The views and opinions shared on Taken Too Soon are those of the guest and don't necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the host and contributors. This podcast discusses mature themes and may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Alex and Jon Dalman come with a particular set of skills, acquired over the last decade working together. Skills that can be a dream for a mother like Wilma Patterson, who's been desperate for answers. Their skill set is finding people who don't want to be found.
Working in the field of bounty hunting before transitioning to primarily private investigation, the Dalmans took up Holly's case as part of an investigation discovery program called Secrets, Lies, and Private Eyes in 2021. The Dalmans uncovered a handful of interesting leads that they shared with the Taken Too Soon team.
We're back in the studio today in Gainesville, talking with some people that we've been trying to track down for a while. They're in the business of tracking people down. They're private investigators, Alex and Jon Dalman. Alex and Jon, thank you so much for coming in today.
Yeah, absolutely. We're excited to be here and to talk about this with you.
Yeah, thanks so much for the invitation.
Yeah. And so when I met y'all were bounty hunters, catching people that have skipped out on bail, but now y'all are doing more private investigation work with Fenrir Group in Decatur. Is that right?
Yes, it is. So we lived in Gainesville at the time when we met you, and we were working as fugitive recovery agents kind of based here in Gainesville, and we've since transitioned into private investigations. We moved to the metro Atlanta area, and that's what we're doing now.
Same skill set as bounty hunting. Our specialty is finding people who don't want to be found and then putting papers in their hands. So it translates. All those years of bounty hunting is essentially the same thing without the handcuffs in jail.
It's a little safer. I wouldn't say it's safe, but it's safer.
Yeah. How long have y'all been doing this kind of work?
Close. It's just over a decade at this point.
Yeah, 10 years together and 11 years for me. I worked for doing bounty hunting for about a year before I knew you.
Mm-hmm.
And y'all are married?
Yes, we are.
Tell us a little bit about, I've heard this story before, but I don't think Greg has. Tell us about how that started.
Yeah, so it's funny, I was working as a professional photographer, owned my business, and when I was a kid, I always wanted to be a detective and kind of had an existential crisis and decided to kind of start looking into private investigations and how I could do that line of work. And I thought, well, this line of work could be dangerous. If I'm going to do it, I need to be able to defend myself. And so I went and took an Israeli martial arts class actually here in Gainesville at the East Hall Community Center. And I met Jon there. And, we knew each other for probably a year or so, just training together before we actually started working together. And that's kind of where you come in.
Yeah, so I was just taking training. I was doing personal security. I was working in that spectrum in Atlanta. And a friend of mine suggested talking to a friend of his who owned the bail bonds company who needed help finding people and putting them back in jail who had skipped bail. And so I had a bunch of files. In the beginning of my bounty hunting career, I could not find anyone. I could catch them. Once I saw them, I was good. But finding is way harder than catching. And I knew Alex had expressed an interest to me. We're just talking between classes, whatever, in becoming a private investigator. And I said, well, I have all these files and I can't find any of these people. Maybe you could take a look at them. I gave them to her, and within a day or so, she called me up. She goes, okay, they're at this address, they're at this address, they're at this address. And I was like, oh, man, okay. So let's try to work something out here. And
yeah, it turned out we had complementary skill sets, and I guess I had an intuition for investigations that I did not know because I had no experience when he handed these files to me, but I was able to turn some stuff up on all of them. And so we started working together, and we did fugitive recovery for a number of years. And then around the time of COVID, of course, COVID was such a strange time for a lot of industries, and the bail bonds industry, the jail stopped basically bonding people. I mean, they were just turning people loose, just, OR bonds, just letting them go. They're like, we don't want them in the jail getting people sick. So we kind of, our bail work started kind of disappearing and drying up. And of course, like a lot of people during COVID, we were nervous. And around that time, we got some inquiries for doing process service and, serving civil papers to people, and realized that the skill set of bounty hunting translated pretty well to that. So we started doing that. we got our private investigations license, our own company. I had actually had a private investigations license of my own since 2016, but we got our own company license, and we've been doing it ever since. And we officially stopped bounty hunting around 2021, which was also the year we got married. And I think it was just, you reach a point where it's like, I'm going to the back door with a shotgun, like my husband is at the front door, and we
were fortunate with all the exposure we took on, both, ultimately liability-wise for what you're doing.
And
physically. I was shot at, dog attacks, fighting, all the stuff that you would associate with putting someone in jail against their will. But we got out of it.
Yeah.
We got out of it. About a month or two before COVID struck, we started taking on a couple of process service cases. And so that pivot from fugitive recovery to process service was pretty smooth. It was like, and in all credit due to Alex, man, she said the light bulb went off in her head. She was like, this is what we need to be doing. And within a year, no more bail. We're turning down phone calls for it.
Yeah.
But the getting out of the bounty hunting there was no identity crisis. I was so
we were relieved.
I wouldn't say I beat the devil, but I drank his beer for free. Got out of that job relatively unharmed, and I'm super happy about it.
And before we started rolling, it was kind of the conversation we were talking about of, it's hard to work in this kind of work and have somebody who might be working a 9 to 5 because you're working all around the clock. If you hear that somebody you're looking for might be heading to the airport, there is no, sorry, honey, we'll have to skip dinner tonight. We got to go.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it would be really challenging to work a job like this and have a spouse who is working just a regular 9 to 5. I'm sure there are plenty of people who do it, but it does work out well for us that it's so our business, our job is so integrated into our lives, our personal lives too. But we're fortunate. We really love what we do, and so I think it doesn't really affect us in any negative way.
Yeah, it never turns off. Let's not talk about work till Monday. It can't. You could be watching a movie and reach up, pause the movie and say, do you think he's at his mom's house? It's just always happening.
Yeah.
And so a couple of years ago, y'all were asked to work on a case for a show called Secrets, Lies, and Private Eyes, and worked specifically on Holly's case. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had been approached by the producers of Secrets, Lies, and Private Eyes, and they wanted to utilize us and our business in a show. And going into it, we didn't really know what that was going to look like. I think we expected that it was going to be, kind of following more of our specialties. We were still doing some fugitive recovery work at the time, as well as private investigations. And so, we didn't know, but they presented Holly's case to us. And then ultimately it kind of, we talked about it a little bit, and then it culminated in Wilma and Angela coming into our office and sitting down and talking to us. And I think after that, after hearing about the case, we felt like there were some things that we could do.
Yeah, just use the skill set that we had. We're not murder police, but we're pretty good at talking to people and just kind of flipping over rocks and seeing what we think. And yeah, I had no idea we're going to have a murder put upon us. But when we met Miss Wilma, she was so kind and nice. And I was like, well, we have to help her somehow. Maybe, I don't know what good we can do, but I don't think we could hurt this.
And when you take on a case like this 6, 7, 8 years after the original death, how did you jump into this one? How did you get started? How did you kind of build the map of where to take your investigation?
Well, we started with the interview with Wilma and her other daughter, Holly's sister. And we talked to them, I don't know, what, 3 hours or so? Mm-hmm. We sat down, like box of Kleenex type meeting. It was really involved and a lot of notes, talking to her. And then we went on, I believe we spoke with the investigator on the case.
Yeah. Our next
investigator.
Yeah. Our next steps were to kind of speak with, first of all, find out who the case was assigned to at the time. And actually that was the very first thing I did was like, hey, let's see who's got this now. Let's see if they know anything about it, if there's any work being done. So, reaching out to Hall County Sheriff's Office about that. And then also we were fortunate to be able to speak with another investigator who had previously worked the case. And we sat down for that was a long meeting, probably 2-3 hours of hearing their theory and kind of, deciding how that might shape our investigation. Because I think we wanted to try and focus on the areas of the case that hadn't been really kind of worked and worn out. There were, I think, a lot of elements of it that had already had a lot of energy put into them. And we wanted to just step back and go, okay, what can we look at here that maybe hasn't been focused on as much?
Yeah, talked to some people who maybe hadn't been spoken to in years or had never been spoken to at all. That was kind of surprising. We spoke to people who had never been in contact before us.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was just interviews. It was just on the ground, finding people who might know the people involved and then just going and talking to them.
What were those elements that y'all delved into that you felt that maybe had not been explored fully?
So I think, again, going back to what Jon just said, interviews were the primary thing. And I think it was also something that we felt like, especially having never worked a murder case before, we did have the skill set for, because in our line of work, tracking down people who don't want to be found, interviews really play into that a lot. You're always talking to, family members, friends, anyone who might give you just like a little bit of information about where this person is at. And so we felt confident in our skills in talking to people and doing those interviews. So, we kind of landed on a few people that we felt it'd be relevant to talk to. And then also there was, and this surprised me, I didn't expect this, there was actually an element of potential physical evidence that I have to give Jon complete credit for kind of landing on. During our meeting with Wilma and Angela, they actually brought the property of Holly's that was given back to them by the Hall County Sheriff's Office. And it's just a little Ziploc evidence bag. It had a necklace and a pin. Now, what's interesting is it wasn't, I brought this for demonstration.
This is Faith Montgomery, producer of the Taken Too Soon podcast. A video of the bail pen that the Dalmans brought for demonstration is available to watch at GainesvilleTimes.com. There is a link to the video in the show notes.
It wasn't a pin like with the full assembled pin. If you've ever just fooling around, you've taken a pin apart, you know that there is a kind of flexible ink cartridge that goes into the body of the pen. And so it was just the flexible ink cartridge of the pen, just like this here. And it's so funny how this happened. So I was laying on the desk and Jon's looking at it and he says, this is like a bail pen. And that is kind of how our background in fugitive recovery actually came into this case, because he recognized the pen as being something you see pretty commonly in jails. So in jails, they don't want for a pen to be able to use it as like a shank or something like that. So a lot of times the COs will take just the cartridge out because it's kind of flexible. And so you can still sign bond paperwork or whatever with it without the risk of an inmate doing something, And he's like, this looks like a bail pen. And that would ultimately come into play later on as a piece of physical evidence. So that was another angle, that unexpectedly kind of
also
came into our life.
That it was found next to Holly's body, this flexible, inexpensive, I've signed 1,000 pieces of bail paperwork with that, turning fugitives in, and they never let you have a real pen. I've even joked about it with bailiffs or whatever, or COs, because it's so flexible. They just don't want you to have something hard like that. But what was interesting, it was returned to Wilma as property. She had a pen on her with no body on it, a flexible pen that you find often in jails, all the time in jails. But she had nothing to write on. She had no notebook. She had no folded piece of paper, no matchbook, nothing written on either of her hands, like a note, grocery list or, someone's phone number. But yet there was this pen lying next to her that got returned as property along with her necklace.
Yeah, it wasn't taken in as evidence. It was given back to the family as her personal property.
And you kind of alluded to it, but is there any possible inferences or connections that we might be able to draw of a pen that is commonly seen in jails or in the bail bond industry?
Yeah. So as we start working the case and we're doing interviews and, we can kind of delve into the details of those a little bit. But as we're interviewing people, we come to find that there was a kind of a possible suspect in the case.
An individual,
who was may have had a background as being working in bail bonds in the bail bonds industry. And so when Jon noticed that pin, it was kind of this moment of like, could this be evidence actually? Maybe instead of her personal property? It could be a reach, but you've got to look into it. So
I always thought that I don't know anything about physical evidence, but I've talked to a million people. And in this case, interviewed people through Ring door cameras and everything. I mean, that's what I do. But when I saw the bail pen, I'll just refer to it as a bail pen, I was like, oh my God. It was like, I realized like just now even thinking about it, I was like, this is evidence, not property. If you look, like I said, there was nothing for her to write on. She had no reason to have a bail pen on her. Holly worked at a grocery store. There was no reason for her at all to have a flexible pen. And then during the course and after that, of talking to Miss Wilma, and she shares, well, there's this other person that does work in bail. I was like, are you kidding me? And it kind of started, without becoming too myopic on that, because we're open-minded to other things, but certainly our suspicions were kind of focused.
So you have that first meeting with Wilma and Angela. The hairs are standing up on the back of your neck. You think you've stumbled onto something here. Where do you go from there? What are the next steps when you're trying to look at you don't want to get tunnel vision,
right,
but you want to look at all of the different elements of this. Where do you go from there?
So we moved to interviews next, and we identified a few people that we really wanted to speak with. There was a friend of Dusty's, Holly's husband, that, we'd heard that maybe this person might have some information. As far as we knew, this person had not been spoken with at all. And so we were able to track them down in a way that was so similar to one of our bail recovery cases.
Bail recovery kind of raises its head in and out of this case a little bit, with tracking down witnesses and the whole possible connection here.
Yeah, absolutely. This person was transient. They didn't have a permanent address. And so it was, it absolutely felt like one of our bail cases going through this we found them in a day, actually, and got in front of them in a day. But it was a saga of a day, just going from place to place, bad address. Here's a little lead, maybe a little tip. And ultimately, we ended up in a conversation with this person.
In a motel parking lot.
Yeah, in a motel parking lot. Again, kind of very much reminiscent of the bail days of like tracking down people who were transient and living in extended stay hotels.
But 100% human intel. Mm-hmm. To get there.
We're finally able to get in front of this person, this witness, and the witness was familiar with the case in general and familiar with Dusty, and also familiar with the individual that was involved in bail bonds, and had some information about that individual. They were aware that the individual owned guns, carried guns, that, maybe they were even known to flaunt their firearms license and the fact that they carried guns. And they kind of knew this person to be volatile. And so, again, just continuing to guide our investigation and just find out some more information about, this individual that we were looking into. And this individual had, as it turned out, had never been spoken to by the police. So we were the first people to interview this particular witness. And so that was definitely very interesting on our end to speak with them.
And did that person have any other connection to the Stricklands or to the family, to the Bakers?
No other connection. This witness's only connection was to Dusty, but they knew Dusty quite well, and certainly they knew Dusty well and were independently aware of Holly's case and a lot of the details of Holly's case.
They weren't strangers to it. They had clearly spoken about it before. And this person that we talked to at the motel wasn't surprised. It was more like, finally, someone's here to talk to me about this. But it was common knowledge amongst that circle of people that they were running with at the time. Holly's case was just common knowledge. They spoke about it.
Hey, true crime junkies of North Georgia, are you aware of what's going on around you? Find out by signing up for our free newsletters from the Times. You'll get local news in your inbox daily, including at least one free article a day about what's happening in Hall County. And now back to the show.
Were you able to talk to the in-laws and Dusty himself?
So I actually spoke with Dusty's mother. Never made contact with Dusty. And I think that part of that was, I mean, we certainly could have, but we were so timid and hesitant to kind of muddy any waters or to just fully grenade this investigation. You know, we're bounty hunters, but I'll talk to his mom. And I spoke to his mom on a rainy day through her Ring camera for longer than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
It was, maybe a minute or so on through the Ring camera, and emotionally charged a little bit, tired of answering questions and stuff, but not really hostile. Understandable given the circumstances of Holly being found on her property and all the things surrounding this case. But I'll say the one part of that conversation that came away to me was his mother said, "I didn't do anything wrong." I'm like, okay, that's okay.
Yeah.
And thank you for talking to me. Ran back to the rain, got in the car. And I didn't think about that for a long time. Just the semantics of that. If I didn't do anything wrong. It's like, okay, that's okay. But I remember that.
Yeah.
That's what I took away from that.
Yeah. We did leave a card. We told her we were going to leave a card, and we left a card at the door, and we said, if you ever want to talk to us anymore or share anything else with us, you're welcome to call us. And she never did, which was what I expected.
Right.
Obviously they've talked, the Bakers have talked with law enforcement, I'm sure 1,000 times, and, are probably tired of answering questions, which was the impression that we got. But we did leave that door open.
We did speak to Dusty's uncle and aunt, though, too.
Yes. So that we did also speak, with Dusty's uncle, who was, and I believe this is well documented, that he was
talking
actually
about Dwayne Lackey.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
That he was the one who actually found Holly's body in the backyard.
Started the phone conversation with him on a Ring camera as well. They were out of town. And I said, well, when you get back in town, give me a call. And they had gotten home. And I remember we were like in an Ingles parking lot or whatever on the phone interviewing him. And he was very talkative and very helpful and kind of gave the play-by-play because he was very close with Dusty as well. They were concerned. They loved Holly. They're like, what is going on here? Why is she not here? And they were upset. And he just described this scenario of when he found out after a couple of days of Holly being missing, that they raced over to the house and pulled in the driveway. And his wife went to the front door, went inside the house, and they went into the kitchen to say, what is going on here? Where is Holly at? And Dwayne walked around the side of the house about 10, 12 yards to the back.
Yeah, I'll interrupt you and say he never went inside the house.
No, he never went.
He made the decision. He was like, well, his wife went inside, and he told us, he was like, yeah, I'm just going to take a look around, see if I see anything.
Yeah, he never even went in the house. His wife goes in, knocks on the door, goes in, and they're talking about Holly. Dwayne gets out of the car, walks about 3-4 yards to the left off the concrete pad to the side of the house, which would be the northern side, left side of the home, walks up to the end of the fence line, which is maybe 15 yards, maybe 15 yards, and
past the pool,
and finds Holly lying there. And then it starts. Then it's on for real.
What did Dwayne tell you about the state of Holly's body when he found her?
if I'm remembering correctly, and, it's been 5 years since this conversation, I don't think that he really looked too hard. I mean, from what we understand, and unfortunately, we've never been able to see, any of the crime scene photos or anything like that. But from what we understand, the body was partially wrapped in a trash bag. I think he, was able to see that it was obviously a human body and Holly's body, and he didn't touch anything or, but I don't, if I'm remembering correctly, and again, it's been quite a long time since this interview, it was partially wrapped in a trash bag. So he was like just seeing enough to be able to say like, oh, this is obviously not good.
And the geography of it is the terrain. There's the fence comes to a corner and there's a pool. Mm-hmm. And the backyard has like a door that goes to the pool. And she was at the far left side of the house, is on the corner, maybe only about 10 yards or so from the road. Mm-hmm. But the road is elevated above it. Mm-hmm. Like you can't see where she was lying. You can't see from the road. Mm-hmm. And also it was in the wintertime, fall, there was leaves down and stuff too.
Yeah.
But you couldn't have seen her from the road, but he found her within 20 seconds of getting out of the car.
Yeah.
She was only partially, she had a garbage bag around part of her or something like that, but still he walked right up to it at that time.
Was there any information about any objects or anything placed on top of the body or near the body beyond what we've already discussed?
So, and I can't remember if this information came from Mr. Lackey or if it came from one of the investigators that we spoke with along the way, but there was a tree branch from what we understand. And again, I say this having never seen the crime scene photos myself, but from what we understand, there was a tree branch placed over the body, which was kind of wrapped in a partially or, in a garbage bag.
And with it being winter, the tail end of winter, from what you've been told or what you can remember, is it likely that it was placed on top of her, or it might have fallen from a nearby shrub or tree or anything like that?
I can't answer that with certainty. The fact that it was taken into evidence, to me, might indicate that someone who was on the scene at the time felt that it was relevant, or that, it could have possibly been placed by someone.
With the garbage bag, an attempt to conceal it somehow. Some kind of camouflage or conceal it.
That was always my assumption, but again, it's hard to say. And like you said, it's a wooded area. It very well could have fallen from a tree, having been there and seen. But obviously, again, a crime scene tech or an investigator at the time seemed to think that it was relevant to take into evidence. So, and I think that's fair and a reasonable thing to do.
I'd gone to the baker's house just on a whim to hopefully maybe get to talk to him. I wanted to let him know that we were doing this podcast and that we were trying to, rehumanize Holly and kind of get her story out in case there is someone that's holding some kind of information. I ran into McKenna first. She asked, "Is this about my mom?" I was like, "Yes." And she said, "I don't want to talk." It was almost like a pre-scripted response to someone inquiring about her mom's death. And I said, "Well, is there anyone else in the house that would like to talk?" And she said, "I don't think so, but I'll ask." And she said, "I'll meet you around front." Less than a minute later, Danny Baker came out. Mm-hmm. He definitely was not interested in talking at all. He actually told me to go talk to the Hall County Liar Enforcement. But I know what you're talking about, the terrain. One of the things that bothers me the most about this is how close her body was to the house, and that it was in a spot where she frequented it often. It was where she would take her nightly phone calls after the kids were asleep. So
absolutely.
It really bothers me that Dwayne Lackey, who doesn't live at the residence, came out there and was able to find it so quickly when there were so many days in between her reported being missing and her body being found.
It's so close to the back door. And like you said, to be found within getting out of the car, walking around the side and just stumbling upon it. It never sat right with me. I'm like, how does this possibly happen? Being that close here, and like you said, she was out there all the time. She'd go out there and take nightly phone calls. She had like a bucket she had out there that she would sit on and take her phone calls, calling her friends or whatever, her mom, because she was living with her in-laws, her ex-in-laws, and she wanted to be out of the house to have some privacy, and that was her spot. And 72 hours, 4 days maybe, from the time someone didn't see her till where she was for 5 days.
Yeah. The trash bag thing is also interesting to us because we've heard rumors about that possibly her body was covered with a trash bag and a limb. So we had that information, but we had never really had anybody who would say yes or no. I had tried to go out and talk to the lackeys as well. I had gone out to their house. Finally, I received a phone call that said they didn't really want to talk, but if we talked to the private investigators and they had talked to you and they said whatever we had said to them.
It was a really good conversation with Mr. Lackey. He was very forthcoming and genuinely loved Holly. They loved her and were very upset. I mean, they enough to drive from North County up to rip down there to her house and say, what is going on? Why are we not? What's happening with Holly? And then just walk up on her body.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm just interested, after you had talked to Dwayne, in his description of finding the body, at any point did he mention to you the oddity that, wow, I was able to find her so quickly?
Yes, he did. It was, but not in an accusatory way. Like, I can't believe they didn't find it, but it was more of like, I couldn't believe it. I walked around the side of the house and there she was. More astonishment at how easy he found her instead of, why didn't you do this?
Yeah, indicates anything about anyone
right.
else.
It was neutral in that regard. At that point, though, after he finds her and goes in, phone calls start getting made and chaos kind of breaks out. Mm-hmm. There's enough time for people to come over. Dusty comes over and other people are around. People are all over the place walking back there. It's not like everyone stand back, don't touch anything. It's more kind of chaos.
My memory was not that the crime scene itself, like where her body was found, was contaminated in any way. It was more that just like there were a lot of friends and family members showing up at the house. From what I understand, they were not doing a great job of like not letting people come into the house. I don't think people were going out back behind where the body was found, but there were definitely friends and family members showing up that probably should have been told like, you can't come in here to the house right now.
We've also heard that someone might have driven through that crime scene or through that area prior to the crime scene being fully assessed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did hear a little bit of that as well.
Right. I know when it took a couple days for her to be reported as missing. Her in-laws, who she was living with, when she wasn't, like the next morning, no one called. There was no police report filed or anything like that. It took a couple days, right?
Yeah, the missing persons report was not filed immediately. It was filed, I believe, a couple of days later. You guys, does that track with what you guys know?
Yeah.
Part of that is, from what we've heard, is that TV has kind of corrupted a lot of our minds to think that you have to wait 48 hours before you can file. And then, of course, when something as serious as this happens, people realize, no. When somebody goes missing and it's very out of the ordinary, her keys and her kids and everything is still there, you need to call the cops immediately and let people know that they're missing.
Right. Yeah. So it took a couple days. It might have been like Wednesday or so. An investigator comes out to take the report, but it's raining. It's a rainy day and it's kind of cold. So he doesn't walk. He doesn't go to where she sits and takes her phone calls. He looks in the backyard by the pool, goes around, goes inside the house and says, thanks. If she shows up, let us know and I'll file the report. But because there's inclement weather, whatever, there was no...
dark.
It was dark. Didn't have his flashlight, was a point that he had made. I don't have my flashlight. It's dark. It's wet. What does she usually do? She sits out there by the bucket and makes phone calls at night. Didn't go out there. Walked out by the poolside and then left.
While the Dalmans are still hoping to see a break in the case, they want to be careful with their words in the hope that there will be an arrest and conviction.
Their investigation led to one person who knew Holly and the family. So, were there any avenues that y'all were able to explore that might not have immediately been on law enforcement's radar?
So we got another tip, another lead for an individual, a potential witness who was also associated with Dusty. And this witness is someone who had come into Dusty's life after Holly's murder. And we heard that they might have some kind of interesting information. And so we started working on tracking this person down. We were able to track them down via phone. They had moved out of state. They weren't living in Georgia anymore. And we had a great phone interview with them. And in this interview, they told us, and I want to be clear, this is like 2 levels of hearsay. You know, they're telling us something that was told to them.
But directly by Dusty.
Yeah.
According to the Dalmans, someone they interviewed was reportedly told by Dusty that an acquaintance of his had killed his wife.
And I mean, you can imagine our shock in this phone interview, right? I mean, again, it's a couple of layers of hearsay, but still, it's like, oh my God, you know, this is.
I thought she was going to tell us something completely like not useful.
Yeah.
Oh, he was a great worker, or he did this. He was a nice guy, or something.
Yeah. So it was a shocking piece of information for us.
Did this person have a connection to the bail bond industry?
Yes.
When you were talking to this witness, did you find her credible? Was there any reason for you to think maybe she was making something up, or did it just seem like a super credible witness to you?
She seemed very credible to me. She's professional. You know, she was what we would call a citizen. You know, it wasn't like she was on the run or transient or whatever. She was very squared away. Also, I don't think she was aware at all of Holly's case.
Before this conversation.
Yeah, before the conversation came up. She's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, oh, you know, maybe if you do some research and look up in Hall County what's going on, that's what I'm talking about, type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, this is weird. You know, why are you telling me this? And one of the Hall County investigators did speak to her.
Yeah. One of the prior investigators did speak with her. And then we spoke with her as well. And we did pass that information along to the Hall County Sheriff's Office. And in kind of keeping, you know, communication with this particular witness for a while, the witness told us that Hall County had not reached out to her. Our last communication with the witness, Hall County had not reached out to her to follow up on that interview.
Do you know roughly when that was?
That would have been late winter of 2021, I believe. I'll say this. I believe the last time that I spoke with this particular witness was probably more in the summer of 2021. So we spoke with her initially in the winter of 2021 and then kind of kept in communication with her. And so
probably 5 or 6 months or so.
Of communication with her, and she had not heard from them. But she was willing to speak with the sheriff's office and share what she knew.
Were you ever able to actually talk to the individual?
We never did. I didn't feel like it was my place to. Like I was going to get this Perry Mason moment where under intense scrutiny, they were going to break down and I did it, John. I'm so sorry. Cuff me. You know, I didn't see anything positive coming from that, except for possibly down the road you being called back and say, why did you do that? So no, never spoke to them. Very familiar with them. Know people who know them. Know where they live. Know what they're up to now. But intentionally, very mindful to stay away from it and not possibly jeopardize things in the future.
I mean, at the end of the day, certainly we have private investigations licenses, but we're private citizens. And so there were actually multiple individuals that we chose not to speak with because we felt that it might do more harm than good. And, law enforcement needs to be the ones having the conversations with these people so that if there are any admissions of involvement, then those admissions can be admissible in court, that they can be well documented. And ultimately, we don't want to muddy the waters or hurt the investigation in the long run by doing that ourselves. So yeah, there were definitely people who we deliberately chose not to speak with and have continued to, refrain from speaking with for that reason.
Because no one has been charged with Holly's murder, the Times has chosen not to use the individual's name who has been discussed in this episode.
Anybody else that came up in the investigation that just provided an idea or even a part of a spider web of where else you could look in this investigation?
There was one more kind of lead that we were chasing down, and, we got a little something from it that was kind of unexpected. We had heard some information that at the time of the murder, Dusty had been staying in a halfway house. And we knew that there were some other men who were living in the halfway house with him. So, we put some energy into tracking down a few of those possible roommates, but one in particular. And unfortunately, we were never able to get in touch with him, the roommate, directly. He was just hard to pin down.
Hesitant to talk to us.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's even possible that there were at least one door we knocked on where he may have been there at the house and just not willing to come to the door. But oddly, we did speak with his mother.
Sat down in our living room and spoke with her.
Yeah, and it was, again, this is one of those situations of like a couple of layers of hearsay, but she, weirdly, the roommate's mother was familiar with the case.
Yes, and familiar with Dusty and the individual as well, and temperament and some, unsure of the timeline. Again, this is hearsay from someone's mom who is living in a rehab, but said that around that time, and she couldn't swear exactly because her son would not talk to us, about some panicked moments at the halfway house surrounding that time of, I need some help with some stuff real quick.
Yeah, of, an individual maybe coming into the halfway house during the middle of the night in a panic, or at least, there being a big argument between Dusty and an individual in the halfway house. And if I'm recalling correctly, that wasn't necessarily the first time that had happened. So the roommate didn't think too much of it and maybe didn't make a note of unfortunately, the exact night that happened, but it was around the time of Holly's death.
Not unheard of to have kind of an emotional outburst there. There was one more person we tried to track down. So Holly's phone record showed phone calls made from the bucket in the backyard to Dusty and to her friend from work.
Yeah, she did have a good friend from work, a woman who was kind of close in age to her. And we did try to track her down. There's just one of those moments of just timing where we went to this woman's family home. We spoke with her brother. Her brother said she literally left yesterday to move to California and she's driving across the country right now. So we're like, oh man, like if we had been
literally the day afterwards.
Yeah. But we got her phone number and tried to reach out to her a number of times. And she communicated for a while and was willing to talk to us, and then just kind of fell off on
just stopped communicating with us.
So unfortunately we weren't able to speak with her, but she was someone close to Holly. They were good friends.
Good friends at work.
I wish we had been able to speak with her. Hate that we weren't able to really pin her down to talk.
I did speak to, it's funny, the interview happened in the driveway of her house with her brother came out to talk to me.
Yeah.
And he knew about the case too.
Yeah.
He knew about the case. He knew about Holly. He knew about Dusty visiting her at work. Remember, he used to come by and she was like the produce manager, I believe, something like that.
I believe she worked in the deli.
Was it deli? Okay,
man.
I'm sorry. Yeah, so she was some type of manager there, and he would come by and see her. And it wasn't that uncommon. So the woman we tried to speak to, who was also one of the last 2 or 3 phone calls on her phone, was very aware of the situation, knew Dusty well.
So short of the shooter coming into the police station, being racked with guilt and signing a confession, what do you think are the hindrances or the stumbling blocks to get justice for Wilma and Angela?
I can say, certainly the biggest stumbling block right now is how much time has passed. There were some steps, I think, that were were taken in the case that if they had been taken a little sooner, we might not be sitting here right now. So I think that's a big element to the case. I think, if you're wondering about our opinion on what it takes to get it solved at this point, given everything that's happened, we talked about this.
Yeah,
actually.
We did. Always talk about it. Our work never stops.
Yeah.
Stuff never stops.
I think that definitely some people need to be re-interviewed. Even people who have been spoken with before, people we've talked to, people the sheriff's office have talked to. I think one thing that I always think of, and I believe a police detective say this once, that as the years go on, loyalties change, and it's always worth going back and talking to people again, because you never know what's happened in the intervening years, and someone might flip. Someone who was loyal before might have a little beef with the person and be willing to say something that they weren't willing to say 5 years ago. So I think maybe some fresh interviews would be good.
So we know that you've talked to at least 2 of the 5 or 6 investigators that have been on the case since 2014.
Mm-hmm.
What do you know of the energy or the ways that the investigators have been tackling Holly's case that you're aware of?
Yeah, so we spoke with 2 investigators that worked the case, and I can say that one of them, I think, did a really fantastic job of working the case and advancing it. That particular investigator put a lot of energy into the case. I felt like they had a good working theory of what happened, and were kind of building some good evidence. And I can say, I think if the case is solved at some point in the future, that investigators' investigation will probably be the foundation of the case being solved.
If you have any information about the murder of Holly Fox Strickland, we urge you to contact law enforcement or email podcastadmin@gainesvilletimes.com. That's podcastadmin@gainesvilletimes.com, or submit an anonymous tip.
Tune in next week where you'll hear more from the Dalmans as we recap the different theories people have about what happened to Holly.
We'll also dive into the DNA results from the pen discussed earlier in the episode.
The music in this podcast was by Ben Ingram.
If you like the Taken Too Soon podcast, be sure to give us a rating wherever you listen. You've been listening to Taken Too Soon, a podcast by The Times.